Okay, so now we are ready to draft the collar. So we want to revisit our collar piece, which was 12 inches by 8 inches with a 2-inch mark from the bottom and a 1-inch mark for center back on the left-hand side. So we are going to pin, and we need to align this with the jacket. So the jacket has to be to this point already. And so we want to pin our center back line at least 2 inches up from the neckline. And we want to align that neckline at the neckline at center back. So make sure that it meets that same point. And then we also want to put a pin a couple inches up at center back. We're going to change that in a minute, but for right now, we want to pin down our neckline. So we have to make sure that we get that in the right spot. Now, what you'll notice is this straight line doesn't like to curve around this without being released a little bit. So we are going to have to clip into this line. So what I like to do is go inch by inch, kind of how I showed you on the neckline when we did the back before. I go 1 inch and I pin it and I make sure that I am actually staying on the neckline that is the jacket. So we're trying to align this with the jacket, and each inch that I go, I can clip in. And again, keep that clip from being any more than, shouldn't be any closer than a half an inch. So then I'm going to go to the next inch, following along that line. If you do much closer, it's kind of just a lot of, it's a little extra work that you don't have to do. Wait, and then I'm going to clip same thing where that pin is to a half an inch from that neckline mark. Continuing around until I need another inch right there. And you want to do this until you get to the shoulder seam. Clip. Making everything lay nice and flat. We don't want to see any of those rainbows. Love rainbows, but not for draping. And so when we get to that neckline, shoulder seam point, put a pin in there. And then we are going to start to fold over our collar. Okay, so now you can fold over your collar to where you might want it to be. So if it's going to be a really wide, thick collar, you can go up high. It should, be at least an inch up from the neckline. I'm going to keep it at 2 inches. I might go a little bit wider just to kind of demonstrate a little bit extra. But you want to make sure this is really on the center back line, and you want to make sure that you put another pin in where you fold it over, because this is also going to be on the center back. So if this starts to swing in, it's not going to create the same shape anymore. It's going to not fit around the neck. So you really want this to stay on center back on that grain line. It's very, very important. So as this starts to come around, it's going to not be able to fit. So it has to be released a little bit. And this is where we want to clip in, but we want to be kind of careful in doing this. Again, we don't want it to open up too much because we want to keep it, we want to keep the fabric, the integrity of it, so that we can mark where things are going to be. So imagine your collar line is going to end somewhere around here. You don't want to clip in above that. So try and keep that from happening. As you go, kind of clipping a little bit around. And so as we start to come around, we want this to lay flat. Again, you can always clip more, so clip conservatively. And now we're going to want to align this with our lapel here. So we're going to now start to drape the collar into the front. And what you'll find is you may need to go back into some of those clips in a few minutes and revisit them a little bit. But what we want to do is kind of drape this along into the lapel. So we want to kind of fold, oops, I should do this facing the camera, fold up and make it so that this line, we don't have to stay on the line of the 2-inch line, but we want it to kind of, the line to fold here. So it has to come Nice, like that. And so here's where you can see it is somewhere where you probably should clip in a little bit more. So, because you can see this is kind of bubbling up right here. So I'm going to clip in a little bit over here. So that helps that to lay a little smoother. So again, I'm just going to pull these two together. And then, you know, you can pin into this because you do want it to go into the line that's marked on the lapel on the front. So I'm going to pin into that just to kind of get that laying and checking, laying and checking. And this will end here, so you don't have to worry about what happens too much down here, but we do want to mark where they're going to come together. And so you can see it's starting to look like a collar shape. Could use a little bit more clipping in here, I think. So this is a pretty nice high collar. Don't want it to be too high because it can actually be an irritant to the neck, you know, if you want to put your head back, but it also depends on the fit of the jacket. All right. Okay, so one other thing you might want to do is just to follow that roll line a little bit more. And you can even put a pin in down low to keep everything in place. So down below where this will definitely not be attached here, but can actually give us a little bit of stability while we mark stuff. So we know this is going to be the edge of our lapel here. And again, you know, you can pin this into shape so you can see it very well. Clip in here just a bit more. Sure, okay. And then we're going to draw in our collar shape. So we know that it's going to kind of come out a little bit from here. We want a little bit of this lapel line. And you can create whatever shape you want from here. And, you know, before you get into notching everything and going crazy or marking everything, you might want to draw the line in and make sure it's where you want it to be. You like the look out of it. And again, we want to make sure that when we mark the back here, it's about 1/4 of an inch below that other neckline, at least at that center back, and then it can obviously stray away from that. So we marked our center, our back coming into the front. And again, if there's still any pulling or anything, now's the time to clip. And again, we're going to want to, you know, practice solidifying these two together. So once you find that line where you want them to be connected, you can pin that in. You can trim away a little bit of this since I know that's about where that's going to be. And step back, take a look. Is that the shape you want? Is that the size you want? Do you want it bigger? Do you want, you know, anything to be different about this collar? Maybe a little pointy, maybe matching up. So make sure you kind of get that shape right. Once you have the shape right, you can then put in the really important stuff where it's supposed to line up with the jacket. So make sure to make a really nice notch where the collar and lapel actually meet. And then you want to continue that line. So trace the line according to where the lapel is meeting. So make sure it's very accurate. This is very, very important because this is where it frames the face and it becomes a very important thing. You can also mark on this side. So if you lift up the thing, you kind of are marking on both sides. And this is, you know, hard because things don't get transferred, but in the right way, but you can figure it out. So make sure you're transferring along the lines. And, you know, I like to put a notch where the shoulder is, and then it should meet up with that center back line, and you shouldn't have anything to true to the back there. So once you have everything marked, you can then take out the pins from this and remove it from the form. We'll take it to the table and true up that collar. Okay, so now we can take this to the table. And we have to transfer over a lot of these. So like I said, some of them will be on one side and you should be able to kind of see them, but it's, you know, easy enough to transfer it over. Just be very, very careful that you're doing it accurately. And using your rulers to true things up. So this is our center back. That's that. This one is a curve to this. This one's straight. So that's our collar. Again, really important notches for collars. I think I feel it makes it much easier. Make it sure at center back it squares out for at least a little bit, following your lines that you have. And then you can transfer this over and add seam allowance, and this will become your pattern. We can add, cut away about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. There may be some adjustments, but this is probably going to need less adjustments than anything else has before, but kind of trim away your drape, and then we can place it onto the form. It's a little funny with this because obviously it's not being sewn to itself. So some of it, you know, folding over backwards versus right way, it kind of gets a little confusing. But, you know, you can also mock it up, you know, before you end up sewing it, just kind of helps a little bit. So I'm going to pin this to the drape. And I will actually pin it into the center back again, because it would be attached to the other half of the garment. So for this, it's okay to use the form to pin into at center back, especially where that roll line is. And you might want to mark that roll line too, if for the back. So again, here I'm going to pin into the garment, doing my best to align, and I'm just thinking about the ways the seam allowances are working. And so here it's folded under so that when I fold it back, you can see it. So again, looking at my notches and making sure if they're not lining up, then now's the time to adjust them, right? To here. And open some of this back. Also pressing, you could press the seam allowance in a certain way to figure this out and make sure it looks, you know, how you're imagining it was going to look and that it's accurate. Okay, and again, when you fold it over, also pin into that center back, because again, that's going to be attached to other parts of the garment. So voila, here we have a draped tailored jacket. So if you're not happy with anything at this point, now is when you would go in, make adjustments, and then you would move some of those lines, open everything up. You know, if you change anything, you want to transfer over your marks, and then you would take them off, true it up on the table, and then you would make a pattern from this. So technically you can use these as patterns if you add the appropriate amount of seam allowance. I like to transfer it over with a tracing paper or with a tracing wheel and tracing paper or tracing paper to make sure that everything is, you know, that this still can be a working piece, because then if you have a pattern, you can make adjustments to the pattern after that as well. So that would be the next step, would be to make a toile and make sure that this fits once it's actually sewn together, and see how some of this eases in once it's actually sewn in. Now you know how to drape a jacket.